So the next chapter we're going to be reading is called Movement. Okay, Movement. We're going to be seeing a little bit about Celia and her Theosin. They're good friends, and so we're going to see them kind of like spend some time together, get to know each other a little bit. Her Theosin is always pleased when the circus arrives in his native Germany, but this time he is particularly delighted that it has arrived quite near Munich, so there is no need for him to secure rooms in another city. Also, he has been promised a visit from Miss Celia Bowen. He has never met her, though they have been exchanging letters for years, and she expressed an interest in seeing his workshop if he would not mind. Okay, so Celia wrote to we saw Celia write to Mr. Theosin like in a long time ago in one of those a different chapter where he's receiving all the fan mail from the reviewers, and he receives a letter from someone named Celia Bowen. Now, he did not know, he has no idea that Celia Bowen is anything significant because none of the performers in the circus attach their name to their performances. So, like, Celia has always just been known as the illusionist, whereas Isabel would always just be known as the fortune teller. Okay, so the fact that Celia signs her real name does not give it away to Mr. Theosin that she is the illusionist from the circus. He just figures he's made a nice pen pal. And so now that the circus is here in Germany, he is going to get a visit from Celia Bowen. Okay, so let's see what's going to happen with all this. Friedrich replied that of course he did not mind in the least, and she would be welcome at any time. Despite so many letters, each carefully filed in his office, he is uncertain what to expect when she arrives. He is astonished to find the woman he knows as the illusionist standing in his doorway. She is unmistakable, though she wears a gown of dusty rose rather than the black and white creations he's accustomed to seeing her in. Her skin appears warmer, her hair softly curled, and her hat bears no resemblance to its distinctive silk top hat, but he would know her face anywhere. "This is an honor," he says by way of greeting. "Most people don't recognize me outside of the circus," Celia says as he takes her hand. "Then most people are fools," he says, lifting her hand to his lips and lightly kissing the back of the glove. "Though I feel a fool myself for not knowing who you were all this time." "I should have told you," Celia says. "I do apologize." "No apology is necessary. I should have guessed you were not merely a reviewer from the way you wrote about the circus. You knew every corner better than most." Okay, so she says, "Sorry, I probably should have told you." He says, "I should have known because you know the circus in ways that nobody else does." Okay, so I am familiar with a great deal of the corners, but not all of them. There remain mysteries in the circus even for its own illusionist? That is impressive." Celia laughs and Friedrich takes her on a tour of his workshop. The workshop is organized so that the front is occupied mostly by blueprints and sketches, moving on to long tables covered in various parts, and a great deal of sawdust, drawers full of gears and tools. Celia listens with rapt attention as he describes the entire process, asking questions about the technical aspects as well as the creative ones. So in case you've forgotten, Herr Thiessen, he is the one that built the original clock, but he is the one that also follows the circus around everywhere and writes about it. So he's kind of like the leader of the reviewers. So she's here. She wants to see his clockmaking workshop. He is surprised to see that she speaks fluent German, though they have only written each other in English. "I speak languages with more ease than I read or write them," she explains. "It is something in the feel of the sounds. I could attempt to put them on paper, but I am sure the result would be appalling." Despite his graying hair, Friedrich looks younger when he smiles. Celia cannot keep her eyes from his hands as he shows her the delicate clockwork mechanisms. She pictures the same fingers inscribing each letter she has received and read so many times that she has committed them to memory, finding it strange that she feels shy with someone she knows so well. Okay, so a lot of people at this point, or at least a lot of my students at this point, will ask if Celia and Mr. Thiessen are romantic, and the answer is no. He might have like a bit of a crush on her because she's so beautiful, but they are just friends. Okay, so they are going to spend a lot of time together and they're going to be very close, but it's never more than a friendship. It's never anything romantic at all. Obviously, because we know that Celia's heart is going to belong to Marco. Okay, so let's go and see what all is going on in here. He watches her with equal attentiveness as they traverse the shelves of timepieces in various stages of construction. "May I ask you something?" he says, as she looks at a collection of detailed figurines waiting patiently amongst curls of wood to be housed in their proper clocks. "Of course," Celia says, though she fears he will ask her how she does her magic, and she dreads having to lie to him. "You have been in the same city as I on so many occasions, and yet this is the first time you've asked to meet me. Why is that?" Celia looks back at the figurines on the table before she responds. Friedrich reaches out and rights a tiny ballerina that has fallen sideways, returning her to her balance on her ribboned slippers. "Before, I did not want you to know who I was," Celia says. "I thought you might think of me differently if you did, but after so long I felt I was being dishonest. I had wanted to tell you the truth for some time, and I could not resist the chance to see your workshop. I hope you can forgive me." "You have nothing to be forgiven for," Friedrich says. "A woman I should like to think I know rather well, and a woman I had always considered a mystery are, in fact, the same person. It is surprising, but I do not mind a good surprise, though I am curious as to why you wrote me that first letter." "I enjoyed your writings about the circus," Celia says. "It is a perspective that I am not able to view it from properly because I understand it in a different way. I like being able to see it through your eyes." When she looks up at him, his soft blue eyes are bright in the afternoon sunlight that shines through the windows, illuminating the speckles of sawdust in the air. "Thank you, Miss Bowen," Friedrich says. "Celia," she corrects. He gives her a thoughtful nod before continuing the tour. The back walls are covered with finished or nearly finished timepieces, clocks waiting only for final coats of varnish or other minor details. The clocks closest to the windows are already in motion, each moving in its unique way but keeping the same harmonious rhythm, a symphony of carefully ordered ticking. The one that attracts Celia's attention rests on a table rather than hanging on the wall or sitting on a shelf. It is a beautiful piece, more sculpture than clock. While many of the clocks are wood, this one is predominantly dark oxidized metal, a large round cage set on a wooden base that has been carved into swirling white flames. Within, there are overlapping metal hoops marked with numbers and symbols suspended from the top, hanging amongst the visible gears, and a series of stars falling from the filigree cap at the top. But the clock sits quiet, unmoving. "This one reminds me of the bonfire," Celia says. Is it not finished?" "No, it is complete, but broken," Friedrich replies. "It was an experiment, and the components are difficult to balance properly." He turns it so she can see the way the workings extend through the entirety of the cage, stretching in all directions. The mechanics are complex, as it tracks astronomical movement as well. I shall have to remove the base and dismantle it entirely to get it running again. I have not yet had the time, though, time it will require. Okay, so there's this beautiful clock, and it reminds them of the bonfire because of it has like a cage at the bottom, and then there's like 12 stars going over it. And he says, "Well, I finished it and it's awesome, but it's broken. The mechanics of it are so complex that it would take me a really long time to fix it." "May I?" Celia asks, reaching out to touch it. When he nods, she removes one of her gloves and rests her hand on the metal bars of the cage. She only watches it thoughtfully. She makes no attempt to move it. To Friedrich, it appears she is gazing through the clock rather than simply looking at it. Inside, the mechanisms begin to turn, the cogs and gears waltzing together as the number-marked hoops spin in place. The hands glide to indicate the proper time, the planetary alignments set themselves in order. Everything within the cage rotates slowly, the silver stars sparkling as they catch the light. Once the slow, steady tick begins, Celia removes her hand. Friedrich does not inquire as to how she managed it. Instead, he takes her to dinner. They do speak of the circus, but spend most of the meal discussing books and art, wine, and favorite cities. The pauses in the conversation are not awkward, though they struggle to find the same rhythm in speaking that was already present in their written exchanges, often switching from one language to another. Why haven't you asked me how I do my tricks? Celia asks, once they have reached the point where she is certain he is not simply being polite about the matter. Because I do not wish to know, he says. I prefer to remain unenlightened to better appreciate the dark. The sentiment delights Celia so that she cannot properly respond in any of their common languages and only smiles at him over her wine. Besides, Friedrich continues, you must be asked such things constantly. I find I am more interested in learning about the woman than the magician. I hope that is acceptable. It's perfect, Celia says. They walk together to the circus afterward, past red-roofed buildings glowing in the dying light, going their separate ways only once they reach the courtyard. Friedrich remains mystified as to why no one seems to recognize her as she walks anonymously amongst the crowd. When he watches her performance, she only catches his eye once with a subtle smile, giving no other hints of recognition. Later, long after midnight, she appears by his side as he walks, wearing a cream-colored coat and a deep green scarf. Your scarf should be red, Friedrich remarks. I am not a proper reviewer, Celia says. It would not feel right. But as she speaks, her scarf shifts in hue to a rich wine-like burgundy. Is that better? It is perfect, Friedrich says, though his gaze remains fixed on her eyes. She takes his offered arm and they walk together along the twisting pathways through the dwindling crowd of patrons. They repeat this routine in the following evenings, though the circus does not remain in Munich long, once the news arrives from London. What news do you think is arriving? All right, we'll find out next time.